sauces. So now we're going to talk about this idea of not necessarily changes that food undergoes or the quantity of food, but we're talking about sauces, and what they're really doing is they're adding something to the other components of food. It's elevating the other normal components of a dish. And it's doing this because of our understanding of flavor. When we talk about flavor, there's two major components of flavor. There's the taste, what we perceive with our tongue, and then what we smell, the aromas that are associated with that. So, and we've all known, if you're sick and you're congested and you can't breathe very well through your nose, the food is going to taste flat. It's not going to taste you're going to get those 5 sort of basic senses we have, but it's not going to, the depth of flavor isn't going to be there because we're cutting off a large portion of this idea of flavor from our nose. And you can also see when you just smell food, you're not getting that same sort of combination of what we refer to as flavor. So it really is these two things working in concert with each other to produce what we're interpreting as flavor. And it's this play on flavor that really makes sauces important to a dish. If you have a dish that doesn't taste complete or there's something slightly off, it typically goes back to, in the sauce, you're missing some critical component. When we talk about taste, we've said it before, but there's 5 basic things that our tongue is able to interpret. We can pick up salty, we can pick up sweet, we can pick up sour, we can pick up bitter, and then we can pick up this savory component. This is the sort of the last one. It's got a couple of different savories, what that's listed here in the text. Edamame is sort of the other one that terms around there. It's that complexity, that 4th flavor that sort of, or 5th flavor that sort of makes the whole picture complete. And this, unlike the pictures you've seen where there's various regions on your tongue where you're tasting the salty, that's really not an accurate picture. You have all of those taste buds interspersed on your tongue, and it's really from those chemical processes interacting with that protein on your tongue. It's sending a signal to your brain, recognizing that as either sweet, salty, or bitter. All of these have sort of an arrangement. And we want a balance, and a truly delicious dish is going to balance all of these flavors together. It may highlight them some more than others. So if you talk about a dessert, a confection like a really rich chocolate, you're going to highlight the sweet, but we want to have the others there to sort of balance it out. We've all had a dessert, I'm sure, that's been too sweet because we're not bringing the rest of those flavors or things into balance. Smell, so we're limited there in taste to those 5 areas. The smell is really a combination of over 1,000 different chemicals that we can detect and distinctly distinguish as a different aroma. So there's a much more complex and nuanced relationship with our interpretation of the aromas that work in concert with this taste. Most of these aroma compounds are going to be nonpolar. They're going to be more like dissolve in fat, so they're what we call fat soluble. They're not going to be water soluble, which means that when we heat these up, most of these are going to be released, and we're counting on these compounds to come out of the food in order to end up either as a true vapor or an aerosol, a sort of small particle, to interact with our nasal passages and later our tongue. And this smell is really adding that depth of flavor, and it's working in conjunction with the taste to really give us a satisfying dish. Right? Sauces, again, are intricate. We can spend semesters talking about different sauces. We can talk about moles from Mexico, those very rich sort of sauces. We could talk about curries from India, that have hundreds of ingredients. We can talk about what we're going to focus on here is basically those starch thickened sauces, partly because they're simple but they also provide a foundation for a large number of other sauces. You get a good understanding of how to thicken sauces with starch. You can then start building flavor profiles, and it'll be amazing. So when we talk about, there's 4 sort of classic ways to introduce starch into a sauce or into food. And this is really going to depend, one of these, you have to use one of these, because if you just add flour into a hot liquid, what it's going to do is, because the starches are hydrophobic, they don't like water. If you add it to the hot water, they're going to clump up, and so you're going to get this very intense sort of ball or clump of this starch, and it's not going to allow these emulsions to occur, and we're not going to be able to carry that or thicken that sauce, trap the water molecules the way we want. So when we're introducing these sauces, we have to do one of these 4 different processes. We can make a slurry. And what you do is you add cold water and you add starch and you form a slurry. So you're sort of mixing together the water and the starch, and you're allowing that, you're forcing the water to come inside the starch molecules, and you're breaking apart some of those clumps. And that's really allowing the starch to start hydrating. And as it starts hydrating, it sort of expands, which will allow us other liquids to start entering into that sauce. The next one is this bechamel, which is we're adding the starch into butter. Usually we take equal amounts of flour and we're working it into butter itself. So we get this, we're adding the starch into the butter, we're sort of forming an emulsion. Butter has a large amount of water in it, so in some respects it's doing something similar, but because of the high fat content, then we're also starting to deepen the flavor. It's a French word, which I probably mispronounced. The one that we're probably fairly common with is this floured meat. We're adding the flour, this starch, very early in the cooking process. So if you've made stews, for example, typically you'll brown meat, sort of get that nice texture on the meat and add flavor there, and then you will roll it or coat it in flour, and then put it into the pot, and that's going to allow that starch to be sort of combined with the fats, and the fats in the water. We're going to create this sort of thickening agent at the interface between those water type ingredients and the fat and things coming out of the meat. The last one is this develop of what we call a roux. And we make roux for a variety of different starting materials. What a roux is an equal part of flour and fat, be that an oil or a grease. You typically can make roux out of, if you've cooked or baked, roasted, a roast. The drippings that come out of that, if you add equal parts that drippings with flour, that will make a nice roux. I use a roux when I make gravy at Thanksgiving. You take the drippings off of the turkey, add an equal amount of flour, and sort of combine it. The good thing about a roux is that because you're adding that fat, which is already typically a fairly complex flavor with that starch, you're sort of doing something similar to the others, but you're combining those, and then you're able to add complexity to that roux by heating it. So you're able to start adding additional chemical reactions to change from that very light colored flour, that white, off-white thing, fairly mild flavor. If you add more heat and more time, that's going to start turning into a cream, and then it's going to go finally into like a brown, and then into a reddish black, which is where the term comes from. And the longer you heat it, just those 2 ingredients, the more complex, the more strength you're going to add to those flavors, because you're breaking down both of those fats and the starches together to form this sort of wonderful arrangement. So you can make gravies and stocks or sauces that have a using the same ingredients are going to have a much different flavor profile just based on the type of roux that you make, whether it's a light roux to a brown to a what they call a black roux. It's really been heated well a long time, and it actually starts to break down, gives us very intense flavors. So this is the point where we're taking on a much smaller scale. We're really not necessarily worried about quantity. All of these sauces are going to be sort of an addition to the dishes that were prepared, but it's really an effort to combine flavors and add flavors. It's very much a game where we're playing with flavor. That's the beautiful thing of sauces. Again, let me know if you have any questions.